Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner, and let's welcome in Derek Piper, fresh off his trip to Brooklyn, kind of a whirlwind, about 24, 30 hours in New York. But a pretty cool moment for the Illinois basketball program as Kasparas, Jakucionis, and Will Riley go back-to-back. Pick 20 for Kasparas, a little bit longer of a wait than we thought it would be. We'll get into that conversation, but Will Riley goes right after him. Derek, you were in the building at Barclays Center. What was it like just being at an NBA draft? We were just talking before this. We don't even know how to cover an NBA draft because we've never been to one before.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough. We've done this long enough. We've gotten to go to so many different cool places, and Illinois had a lot of success. That there aren't many firsts, as I told somebody, kind of left in the college basketball world, just in terms of what we expect to do. This was one of them. This was one of them for me and for Illinois in a long time. So, yeah, getting over there was really cool just to see. You kind of look. It's a made for TV event, so it's geared towards people who are watching on TV. Even the people where they're sitting in the stands, you're not getting really up close views. The green room is it's at Barclays, so it's where the Nets play. The green room is where the seats would be or where the court would be, then up against the stage. But I think the coolest part of it, obviously, is the raw emotion, just knowing what the moment means for these guys, for their circles, their families, the people that help them come up, and you just get to kind of have the human element come into, with a lot of players, it's all about their stats and what they do on the court, and so you get to hear about their personal life, their come up, and just it's a dream come true for all of them. So to see that happen, a lot of big names, obviously Cooper Flagg, the star of the place. Rutgers fans were coming out thick for Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Got a couple of RU chants there in the building. I think that also just there were so many different fans across the league. Like it was one of those mixes of just, oh, there's this guy in a jersey. I saw on Twitter someone was wearing a full-on Raymond Felton Bobcats jersey. I didn't run into that guy, but there were just so many different teams represented, fans, and yeah, obviously a cool night and really cool for Illinois. So it was good to be there. Good to catch up with those guys. Long wait, and then it took a while for those guys to get to the press conference, but ultimately it was worth it, and enjoyed being there.
Biggest thing outside of like some 30-point explosions from Bailey and Harper that Rutgers fans have had to cheer about. So, hey, I get it. That's a huge moment for them with 2 top 5 picks. A lot I want to get into here, Derek, but you caught up with the staff. You caught up with Brad Underwood after this. It's part of the great thing about going places is, you get to catch up with these people right after it happens. I know you talked to KJ and Will Riley in the press conference. It's interesting because you covered Io's draft party and Terrence's draft party. And we got to know those guys pretty well, like especially Io. Like you got to know him for a long time through his recruitment process, and then he's here for 3 years. These guys, like we got to know them a little bit, especially KJ. I felt like we got to know Will Riley, not as much. Like even though he talked to us, he wasn't all that chatty, but we got to know these guys a little bit. But it's a one and done. But this is obviously a huge moment for the program. So talking with the staff, just your own perspective, what do you think this meant for Illinois to have back-to-back first-round draft picks, to have 2 in the same year for the first time in 20 years?
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge to be able to sell the fact, like you said, 2 in the same draft, 3 first-round picks in the last 2 years is a huge thing to put out there. Io, you add in the mix that Io's on his second contract, about to get a third. So that's a real NBA presence that Illinois has, and the ability to get people to the league. It's a very established now and very recent track record. So, and I think it's important. I wrote about it in terms of taking in what it means that, Kasparas has come out and said a lot of great things about Illinois in terms of the relationships that he had here, just the position that he was in. He got the keys to the car and came in and had so much opportunity, so much exposure. So, his voice in Europe is going to matter a lot. And I think especially if he goes in, and we'll talk about the situation he'll be in, if he goes into Miami and has success and continues to be someone that elevates his profile, Illinois is attached to him. Yes, for only a year, but if you ask him, he says Illinois is like family. So that matters. That's something that pushing forward will matter. But in the immediate, there's an immediate adrenaline, just immediate shot in the arm for Illinois on the recruiting trail to say, hey, look what we did in this draft. Look what we've done in the last 2 drafts in terms of first round picks. So whenever and I know that, Jeff had a good line. I caught up with Jeff Alexander and he said, hey, guys want to see the blueprint. Jeff's somebody, and obviously Orlando and Cameron Crocker is going to be in this role to be involved in the day-to-day conversations with recruits. And it comes up so much. I know that Brad had the line and it makes sense. Back in the spring, we're talking a lot about money with people right now, and it's true. Development is also something that people want to talk a lot about. But yeah, I mean, and within that development is getting guys to the league. So I think the exposure, that there's eyes around the country, around the world watching that draft, and to see Illinois on back-to-back picks flash up there, to have the graphic, those two side by side, that's huge. And it's a place they haven't been in a long time, and it's one more box. Brad's checked. He's been the master of checking first since 2005 boxes, and that was one more that he got to check the other night.
Yeah, and the other thing I think about, it's a good time to hop on a plane. I don't know if they went directly from Brooklyn in New York right to Serbia, because that's where Brad Underwood's heading.
I think they were, yeah.
I think Orlando Antigua and Jeff Alexander are going over there to have those pictures that they can send to say, hey, look at KJ. And, KJ and Will both were NBA prospects before they arrived at Illinois. That's why getting them is so important, because it's easier to make NBA prospects when they're already kind of built-in NBA prospects. But KJ, I remember Gavoni had him late 20s when he committed to Illinois, kind of rose as the summer went up. So he was already considered a first-round caliber prospect, but he goes number 20. I know that's not as high as we thought mid-season. We'll talk about that here in a second, but he was helped by Illinois. Coming to Illinois helped him compared to, Nolan Traore slipped about 10 spots, went ahead of KJ still, but slipped about 10 spots from where he was thought going into the year. Hugo Gonzalez slipped from lottery prospect to 28. So coming over to Illinois and coming over to college basketball certainly helped him. And while Will is a 5-star prospect, which means people think he's going to be an NBA player, he was not considered a lock first-round draft pick coming into this year. And, think about where he was in mid-January, Derek. He was in the middle. I just looked up these numbers again. He had a 14-game stretch where he averaged 7.1 points, shot 29% from the field, and 16% from three. But over the last month, as KJ struggled, Will got more of the keys to the offense. And man, he developed and blossomed into a first-round caliber prospect for a team like the Washington Wizards. So what do you think Illinois did well in the developments of these guys for the years that they had them?
I think just to start with the opportunity to come in and play through growing pains, to be able to be put in featured roles, to obviously show out in big ways when they're playing well. Kasparas having the keys to the car early to show his playmaking, to show the fact that he can score off the dribble, the step backs, and he was sensational through the first 2 months of the year, obviously. Will Riley to be able to still get opportunities. There's places where you could get, if you're on a veteran laden team and you don't get the same type of early chances, but also when you struggle, you go in the tank a little bit and you're fighting confidence, like you may not get the same cracks at going into the game and trying to work through it. So obviously those were part of it. Will's physical development was a big deal. Seeing physicality on a regular basis, and he gave credit to that when, in the press conference when I got a chance to ask him questions and some others, of saying, hey, dealing with some of the questions of him going into the NBA is, how is his body going to hold up? He's seen now, grown men in the Big Ten and face some of that stuff. So I think that he obviously was able to adjust throughout the season and be able to find ways to still be effective and at his current weight, and we'll see where he goes forward. But there's a lot of things that we don't see, individual development wise, understanding the game. Brad said, part of the development is being in the spotlight. It was a lot bigger of a spotlight. Will could have stayed. I think technically Will could have stayed in high school one more year, maybe gone prep school and then gone straight to the NBA if he wanted to, if his stock was good enough to do that. Kasparas could have played. I'm not knocking, and if he would have played similar to Dame Sarr, if he was in the Euro League playing for Barcelona A team, like he would have faced bright lights and big stages, but 16,000 strong every night at State Farm Center, going on the road in the Big Ten, playing the NCAA tournament, like that's exposure to what you're going to do in the NBA and get a lot of attention, and everything's under a microscope. So those are all experiences that are positive. Even when you are maybe failing at times in those, you get a chance to come back and learn how to deal with it, learn how to develop and grow. And I think both guys would speak very highly of what they experienced there at Illinois as far as all that goes.
Kasparas Jakucionis' first 15 games of his college career were just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. 16.7 points, 50% shooting, 42% from three, 87% for the free throw line, 5.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds, 3.6 turnovers. He always turned it over a lot in that high usage role. But I mean, some of those performances that he had, Arkansas, Missouri, Oregon, Indiana, he had gotten to the point where people were talking about him as a top 5 pick. We talked about him as a top 5 pick because people like Gavoni and Sam Vicini were saying that he's playing at that level. Obviously, the second half of the season, not as strong. Had some good games in there, Minnesota being one of those, him and Will. It was the culmination of what those guys could be. But the last 9 games are bad for Kasparas. There's no doubt about it. 12.2 points, 36% from the field, 25% from three. And, of course, more turnovers, 4.2 per game than assists at 4. Still, a lot of people, most had him as a top 10 prospect coming into this. So, Derek, when you're sitting in Barclays Center, when did you start to get nervous? When did you think that this fall was real, and what was going through your head as you were experiencing it?
Yeah, that was something that I felt like he could slip into the late lottery. You even saw the the very end of the projection. The string of mock drafts from ESPN had him, at one point 12 to the Bulls, 11 to Portland, and Wu and Gavoni were writing that, hey, 11 to 14 seems like the most talked about range for him leading up into the draft. So the idea that he maybe won't go 8 to Brooklyn or 10 to at one point Houston, and then obviously to Phoenix. That wasn't totally surprising, but the fact that Washington and Brooklyn were teams that were on the front end that thought, hey, this could be a chance for him to go, and then Brooklyn had another pick. I think Washington, did they trade back or just
Yeah,
had multiple?
they had 18. They went back to 21. Brooklyn had 19. But once they took Demon, which is a high upside swing, but boy, I think there's a lower floor than KJ there. But yeah, once they took them, I was like, man, because those were two teams that, especially Brooklyn, had a lot of buzz with KJ. And then there were some teams like in the teens, like the Bulls that had guards. So like you're thinking, could he slip here because there's just not a need for a guard? And I was like, who's going to be a fit? Once Brooklyn didn't take him at 19, I finally started to think Will Riley could go above Kasparas Jakucionis, which to me, given what we saw all year for the most of the year, would have been kind of crazy.
It would have been, certainly, and that's something that I did not expect. Did not expect him to fall that far. I know that if you follow Bill Simmons, he's on this. He was a big Kasparas fan, and he is super upset that he went to the Heat. And he's like, "Oh, of course, the Heat always get somebody that falls too far or is going to turn out to be a really good player." So there's a lot of people that like Kasparas. If you heard what Ryan Russillo and Sam Vecini said about him leading into the draft as
Gavoni
well.
loves him. Yeah.
Gavoni, there's a lot of people that are high on what he's going to do. So yeah, I didn't expect him to drop like that. Ultimately, I was at a good eye on Kasparas's table as I was able to work in myself into a media seat. You could see his agent numerous times would get up and take a phone. I'm like, oh, is it happening? Is he going to come back to the table and be like, all right, we're going? And then it was no news. So it was just a long, drawn out wait. You can imagine, we saw a long wait with Io, and it's tough. And similar to Io, and I wasn't nearly as close to Kasparas as I was to Io. Very stoic and hey, just kind of trying to be as knowing a lot of eyes are on you, and you're just trying to keep it together. And but it's an uncertain time. Yeah, and then when it happens, it's just euphoria. It's a bunch of hugs and handshakes and one of the best moments of your life. So you're just happy for those guys. And then it was a whirlwind. Like I was getting ready to go down to the press room for Cat. I didn't even see Will get picked,
Right.
to be honest with you. So, but yeah, it was unexpected. But as we'll probably talk about, I think it ends up being a pretty good landing spot, and Kasparas was excited about where he's going.
Yeah, it's true disappointment to fall that far, and there's millions of dollars at stake when it happens. Like if he would have ended up at like, a Washington or a program like that, I would have felt like, man, that stinks. But like once you fall, but then you get picked by the Miami Heat in that roster with that coach, Eric Spoelstra, who I think is clearly one of the best 2 or 3 coaches in the NBA, with Pat Riley as the head of the organization and the ultimate winner and kind of baller in Pat Riley. It just, I feel so happy for him because I couldn't have thought of a better fit. I know you did your fits. I wouldn't even thought of Miami because I didn't think they were within range. But then you look at the roster, it's like he could play with shooters like Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, Duncan Robinson, right? And then defenders like Wiggins is on the trade block, but he's a really good defender. And Bam Adebayo, who's as good of a defender as there is. It's just that is a perfect incubator for Kasparas, who I imagine can come off the bench for them early, but and you talk about development, like they just seem to get the most out of their guys. I didn't even mention Khalil Ware, who kind of fell into their laps last year as well. It just seems like a perfect place for him to grow, to develop. And to be honest with you, some of the questions I had about him were confidence late in the year. I think they're going to breathe some confidence into KJ, and to get a guy who is considered at least a late lottery guy at pick 20, maybe he's not the lead guard of a team like we thought could be possible midway through the season. But I still think that's an NBA guard, whether it's off the bench or eventually a starting point guard. He's got work to do, Derek, but I think there's great value for Miami and a perfect spot for KJ.
I agree with all that. Yeah. And they certainly, Brad mentioned that was as good of a place as he could have imagined for him to go, just knowing what that place is about. You know what you're getting with Miami. You're getting great player development. You're getting a winning culture, getting a great coach in Spoelstra. So there are a lot of situations in the NBA where you go to an organization. Unfortunately, the team we root for in the Bulls is one of those right now. You're like, ooh, I don't know if they're gonna get the best out of them or do the right things with the roster construction and those type of things. But Miami is one of those places. So and you mentioned there, him and if he's going to get a chance to play ball screens with Bam or even Khalil Ware, that's something that I think that Kasparas can do pretty darn well. And I'm excited for him as far as that landing spot goes. I do want to throw in beyond just KJ. I get why there would be disappointment from Illinois' standpoint for him to fall, because it's all about perception, right? And if you want to sell development, people are going to look at where he was projected earlier versus where he went. And I'm not going to say that because he slid, and all of a sudden we can't call it a development win or any it really hurts your sell as far as that goes, because this is not the last reference point. What he does with Miami, if he clicks with Miami, if he plays well, then people are going to remember that far more than where he ultimately went in the draft.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Io, right? Like Io is a developmental win, even if he didn't end up being a first round draft pick. And I would just point towards, it was never a guarantee he was going first round, even if he had entered the year as a first round pick. Illinois played against a guy, Boogie Fland, who was projected as, I think, a lottery pick coming into the year, and he's going back to college and not going to Arkansas. So that is a developmental win. The other thing with Will Riley that I thought Michael Tuitt made a great point, is some people think he should come back to college because he has more development to do, and he does have a lot of development to do. But if he would have come back for college, it wouldn't have meant he comes back to Illinois. Like, he could have entered the transfer portal, and now you can sell him as a first-round pick at 21. Maybe if he came back to college, he goes 10 next year. There's never was a guarantee that it's for you. So at least you get that kind of sell for you. I thought that was a great point. KJ certainly has to cut down on the turnovers, the decision-making. He's got to improve there. I do think it'll be better for him not having to play a high usage role, because getting by people is not his strength. Like Jeremiah Fears, that is his strength. He just gets by people. And I think he'll even do that at the NBA level. But that certainly is not his case. What I think needs to improve as much as anything, Derek, is consistency with his shot. As we said, like after that wrist injury, 24.2% from three. I'll always wonder, and I don't know if anyone's ever going to say it, Illinois has not made that excuse for him, but did that affect him? But you and I have both heard independently, like the workouts didn't go all that well for KJ from a shooting standpoint. So that's got to improve for KJ to succeed. But he's got the ability to create some space and shoot those step backs. We know he can shoot. We know he's got a huge basketball IQ and just great around the, able to find spaces in that pick and roll and find his teammates and make them better. And I like that he rebounds and he at least tries on defense. I don't think he's going to be a good defender, but he does battle. So I just think there's a lot of good things, and I feel more confident about his ability to get to that now that he's at Miami. But he certainly has things he's got to work on.
He does, for sure. The shooting standpoint, it was just a drastic split because he was shooting around 40% from three pre-injury, and he has shot it well, especially certain games where he played against Hugo Gonzalez and going over there in one of the Spain finals. I think he made 6 threes, and that was and Demon, Yegor Demon on that team as well with Hugo. So um, he's been somebody that can pop up and obviously have a wave of threes from beyond the arc. But I think it'll be interesting as he settles into more of a combo role. Can he be a catch and shoot guy? Can he get efficient as far as that goes? Because that hasn't been a big part of his game. He hasn't been very much a catch and shoot weapon where a lot of rookies go into. You're a supplemental piece and you're off the ball in a lot of cases. Now, look, KJ's a playmaker. His best asset is going to be his passing and his creation off the dribble. But that's something that, yeah, he does need to get more consistent with for sure. Obviously, the turnovers, the decision making, maybe even some confidence as far as that goes, or just not getting rattled, not getting shaken if something doesn't go right. As far as just being able to bounce back from a mistake or a bad game, in terms of that. But he's still a young player and he's very talented. And but yes, we both heard that some workouts didn't go great at some places that Portland was mocked, and I think I'd heard that was maybe within the last week of up into the draft, where Illinois at least thought that was a really good chance for him to go at 11, and Phoenix was also taking a close look at him at 10 and worked him out. So that played into it, as well as the fact that last 9-10 games he just did not perform well, and there's a lot of holes to poke in those performances for sure.
I've always been, and I'm unabashedly, I'm a believer in KJ's talent. I am. Some people have not liked that throughout the past year. We have called him a top 10 draft pick because he has been labeled as one. He did not end up a top 10 draft pick. So if you want to take a victory lap over that, go ahead. That is fine. If you want to go take a victory lap, that I know more ball than Jeremy. I believe in Kasparas. There's other people that do as well. But I hate that the conversation about him when he did get to that territory was being mocked as a top 5, top 10. I hate that, the fact that we talked about him like that has like soured people on him. It feels like, Derek. I hate that. And I hate that some people were taking victory laps about that because he was a really good player. He was a really good player. And I thought a great representative of Illinois. And at the end of the day, he is their second highest draft pick since 2005. He's one of the most talented players that has come through Illinois. And I feel like there's a segment of the fan base that just doesn't like him. And that's really sad to me because he was a joy to watch, especially early in that season. Like I even go back to the Minnesota game where he was phenomenal. UCLA, he had 24 points in that one. And that was after the injury. So like there were some really great performances, and I will never be able to get out of my head what he did to Arkansas and Missouri. He carried Illinois and just was a stone cold killer in those games. And that's what I was worried about late in the season. I just didn't see that out of him. The confidence wasn't there. He just couldn't deal with what teams were doing to him. So he's got to make that adjustment at the next level. But there was just a lot of NBA stuff. Like you and I watched the NBA and some of the step backs, some of the ability to get to the rim, finish at the rim. There's NBA things in his game that I enjoyed watching. And I am not sorry that I enjoyed those things. And I wanted to defend that guy and believe in him during the year. And I think obviously the NBA has shown some belief in him by making him the number 20 pick. So yes, he had flaws, all of that. But for the most part, I enjoyed the Kasparas Jakucionis experience. And I'm kind of sad that some people soured on it so heavily, probably because we talked about him and others talked about him like a lottery pick when he had flaws. But that's what one and dones are, man. Like Jeremiah Fears had some great games and some bad games. Ace Bailey, man, like watch that roller coaster. There's a lot of these one and dones that it goes up and down, and Illinois had to rely on them. And that was more about the roster construction, but it obviously helped them too. KJ and Will helped lead them to the NCAA tournament because they don't get there without those two. But it also led to a lot of inconsistency, having to rely on an 18 and a 19-year-old.
For sure. There's a lot of layers, obviously, to a conversation like this. And you said it, though. I mean, there were, Terrence was a guy. Obviously, Io was a guy. Kofi was a guy that when you and I are sitting next to each other courtside, we just look at each other after a play and like, oh man, that was special, especially to see that up close. KJ had a number of those moments as well, and even the Purdue, what turned out to be like the game-winning shot, the last home game ever at State Farm Center, to pull up and make that shot, and a night where he did not play all that well, and beyond just the step backs and ability to navigate to the rim, some of the things that he would see off the bounce as far as a passer and creativity to get guys shots, through the legs. I think at Oregon, like he's able to dribble up through the legs, like no look to Benham Rickhouse for a three, and a very creative, fun guy to watch.
Can I suggest something to everybody? I know the lows, man. I was there through all the lows, the head scratching decisions, the bad turnovers, just bad turnovers that hurt his team. I get it. Just go back to a Kasparas Jakucionis, go to YouTube, go to the highlight video, and just remember some of the good times. That's all. Just balance it out a little bit is all I would ask.
No, I think it's completely fair. Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of struggles, and there were some really low lows, and I think that I agree with you. I think the bar of expectation did make people that, because they knew what they saw with their eyes as far as the struggles, and then I think it was hard to have the mock drafts fully catch up, and we were in a position where we're going to trust what Gavoni and Vicini and those guys are hearing and saying about where he's going to land. Of course, it's never in stone. It takes teams to be able to do their own evaluations at the combine and individual workouts, and then for the draft to fall as it does.
There's also the comp, and I'm not trying to say like college fans, Illinois fans can't be NBA fans, but we just saw two NBA guards come through, and Terrence Shannon and Ayo Dosunmu, who don't make those mistakes, right? Like at least at year 3 for Ayo Dosunmu, right? When he's 21 years old and has been through those wars, and year 5 of college basketball for Terrence Shannon. Like those guys were more dominant college basketball players. They're easier to project to exactly what they will be in the NBA. But Kasparas was 18. And NBA teams aren't drafting a guy because they're completely ready to play. And KJ showed, and he's hurt a little bit because he's not completely ready to be a lead guard of an NBA team. But there were still like the flashes that we know that we've seen one and dones come through here at Illinois and on other teams and make mistakes and all that. But the talent is clear. And KJ had those flashes, but he also had really bad moments.
He did. And I don't know that, I don't think it's personal from a fan standpoint. I can't speak obviously for fans. I think one thing though that plays into the idea of the personal connection is that he wasn't here like an Io for 3 years. They didn't have that relationship. Hey, that's our guy. He just came in as this 10-month rent-a player, which look, it's great. It's great to get that talented of a guy in a talent area where you can go back to and be able to sell him. He goes to, ends up being a first-round pick. This is, I think, to your point, this is a huge net positive for Illinois basketball, is that you brought him in and he helped you get to the tournament. And we could have a conversation. I mean, I'm telling you, we could do a whole podcast. You could have a conversation. Hey, what happens if Illinois actually says, no, we'll take Jeremiah Fears, and they never even get into the Kasparas Jakucionis business. Like, I don't know that you win the game. Some of the games you won earlier in the season, Jeremiah was a better player late in the year than what Kasparas was. So it is interesting to try to really land on a sure ground in terms of what that would have looked like. But I do think, Jeremy, the fact that there wasn't that long-standing, you didn't get to know him a lot in the recruiting process. He comes in, he's only here for a year. I think that's easier to maybe sour on a guy than it would be otherwise. But I think also people forget that Io if Io was a freshman in the same position, and I know he wasn't in a role to be the ball in the hand, and he had some mistakes. He had some games where he was a real dud. There's that too.
Yeah. The other part about like Io's freshman year, it was kind of, I mean, there were some real low moments early in the year. I was there in Maui. That was not a good run for Ayo Dosunmu, but there was a rise, right? Like, and so the end feel of Ayo is the Michigan State shot, right? And the Dan Dockich call on it, which was fantastic. That's the same thing with Will Riley. Like we talked about Iowa as a potential draft pick as a freshman. We talked about Will Riley's potential draft pick as a freshman. It was more like the second round conversation. KJ was talked about like a top 10 pick, so the expectation is higher, but he also late in the season dipped. Will Riley in the middle of the season was not good. It was not good. But I do think the approval rating of Will Riley is so much higher because the expectation kind of got low for a while and then it just completely went through the roof. I do think there's a fun style of play that Will had. There's almost a mature style of play he had late in the season because he doesn't turn it over. He did create for his teammates, but he had a worse stretch, that 14-game stretch of shooting 30%, 7.1 points than KJ ever had during the season. But the end was so good, so much fun that I think that's why, I think Will Riley was a fan favorite, like by the end of it, but it's just kind of an interesting dichotomy between those two, but both helped. I'm not trying to paint one against the other at all. It's interesting how perception changes based off of timing, expectations, outside expectations, all of it.
It does for sure. I think also turnovers are just something that drives fans crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like post Andre Curbelo syndrome or anything, but I think it's just also natural to be like, this is a correctable thing to be able to take care of the ball, not to make these self-destructing mistakes as far as that goes. So, but someone's got to handle it. There's a reason Kasparas had the ball in his hands a ton because, Kylan Boswell, not a great, he had his turnover issues as well, especially when KJ was out. So they put a lot on his plate. They had to. I think another conversation that you could draw up is there's maybe some amplified criticism or just the fact that those Will and KJ are two highest paid guys on your roster. They both made $800,000. You're talking about nearly $1 million players, and I think this is more of maybe a roster construction or just what needs to be different going forward. You added both late in the cycle. If you would have maybe landed, different things go, dominoes fall different ways, then that might not have been the case. It wasn't like the plan at the outset of, hey, let's go get 2 one and done players, pay them the most money, that type of thing. But and we've seen a little bit of a pivot, or at least it's an early way to I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, Brad, look at Brad's roster this year. He obviously doesn't want one and done players again, but they are older and they wanted guys that were established a little bit more. But that's another thing I think people knew that about. These are your 2 biggest ads, 2 highest paid pieces, and when they struggled, then you maybe were more apt to be pretty negative about it.
January 1st, I wrote a column like of my predictions for the year. I said Will Riley will return because of the struggles at the time, and it just made sense. Like I thought he could have been one of the Big Ten's best players, lottery picks if he returned, and he certainly would have been. What an amazing late season rise! Just amazing development for him and the staff. Fletch did a phenomenal job adding a lot of weight. Sounds like Will lost a little weight since then. But obviously the size, the skill, the feel, you've been on it since he was a recruit, Derek. We talk about him as a scorer, but his playmaking is really intriguing. Goes to Washington. I feel better about that with some adults in the room now. CJ McCollum. Who's the guy they got from Milwaukee? The wing. I can't think of
Chris
it.
Middleton.
Yeah, Chris Middleton.
Marcus Smart's there as well.
Marcus Smart. So they got some veterans there now that I feel a little bit better about him spending time in Washington than I have in recent years. But they got Kaishan George, they got Koulibaly, they got a bunch of interesting young players. So I don't think a lot of playing time is going to be there early for Will Riley, but this is always a long-term upside development swing for a franchise. So it makes sense for a team like Washington. But it'd be interesting to see who jockeys for playing time, who eventually becomes trade bait for another team in that Washington organization as they eventually try to find a star. But at 21, I get it for a rebuilding franchise for Will Riley. And I do feel a little bit better with the infrastructure in Washington now than I did maybe a year ago.
I think it's a good point in terms of, the veterans to learn from. I know that Brad mentioned specifically to me, CJ McCollum being somebody that will just show him how to be a pro. And that's something that he can certainly try to soak up as a sponge. You hear that a lot from these guys after they get drafted. They just want to go in and learn and lean on some older guys. And that's important. When you don't have that in a situation you go to, it can be something that is tough from a development standpoint, learning how to work like a pro, how to just do it at this level. So there's opportunity too with Washington not being. It's not been a competitive team. And like you said, there are some like pieces around him, but Kaishan George is inexperienced, just like Will is. So maybe, that's going to be an intriguing position battle. But it's pretty amazing that he went from, not that we wrote it or we're going to, write him off middle of the season, but it looked like Will Riley should come back to school for a long time. And he, even up until the final month of the pre-draft process, Sam Vecini had him as an early second round pick. And in that position, you're probably best off coming back with the NIL and rev share that's there at college. So he made a good decision, obviously, staying in the draft. He showed a ton down the stretch with the playmaking, with the shot making. He was, him and Tommy and Kylan became it, but there was a long stretch of that from February 1st and on where Will Riley was your best player. There was, a significant amount of that sample size where he was your best player. So, like you said, it was a natural arc for a freshman where struggle, and then it works out. And I give him a lot of credit and the Illinois staff a lot of credit for having his mind in the right place and just figuring out how to, what was going wrong and how do you play more under control and get where you want to go off the dribble. And they just kept giving him more and more chances to create. And he didn't have turnover issues. He made good plays with the ball in his hands. And it was a huge part of Illinois getting to the tournament. And his game against Xavier was awesome too.
Yeah, I wanted to look this up because early in the season, it just felt like he thought he was a three-point shooter. Like he did not want to make contact with anybody. Late in the season, he was inviting it. And what stood out to me about Will late in the season, for a 19-year-old, how patient he was with the ball in his hands, the moves. Obviously, he played kind of like that old man at the Y game, only 6'8" and a decent athlete. But just super smooth with the ball and so patient and just found a way to get to the rim. And his cutting at the end of the year was fantastic. He can score a lot of points in the NBA if he's more active like that. Felt like he had to be a ball in his hands, high usage, step back three-pointer guy like KJ was early on. He found a way to be smarter with the ball and just be a little bit more patient with everything. And that's part of maturity in your first season of college basketball.
It definitely is. I mean, we're only a little more than a year away from him playing AAU ball, and he explodes for that 42, which look, it was phenomenal. It's the best AAU performance I've ever seen live in person. But that's a big jump to go from, EYBL basketball, then to the Big Ten, and then now to be a first round draft pick. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the spin moves in the lane to just be able to understand where guys are trying to cut off his angle and just get to where he wanted to go. Could get to his spots so well and have patience to not get sped up, not to take. He took a lot of off balance contested shots earlier in the year and didn't do that as time went on. And yeah, the cutting off the ball. I mean, him and Tommy had such a synergy to him late in the year that was a huge staple of Illinois' offense. And the confidence was there. He didn't quite show it for a while there, but did have confidence, did just provide such a huge shot in the arm for Illinois, and it kind of helped to counter off some of the KJ struggles. And look, for the NBA standpoint, when you got a guy that's 6'8" that has that skill set offensively, that's something that's going to be super intriguing. And he's an upside play, but I would like to roll that dice if I was a team, especially in the 20s for Will Riley for sure.
All right, this is a pretty telling stat. First 15 games, Will had 68 three-pointers attempted, 66 twos. Last 17 games, 76 threes to 149 twos. So it was like a 1-to-1 ratio. Then it was a 2-to-1 ratio. It just that completely changed the approach to his game. So kudos to him, kudos to Illinois for that development because it got him to the NBA this year. All right, Derek, I got to bring it up. Jeremiah Fears, former Illini commit, goes number 7 to New Orleans Pelicans. Now he's a 2025 commit for Illinois, would have joined them this upcoming season. He wanted to reclass. Illinois had KJ, they had Will Riley, they had Kylan Boswell. And we know how that went. Opens up his recruitment, goes to Oklahoma. What a get for Porter Moser, gets him in the NCAA tournament. Phenomenal year. He goes number 7 to the Pelicans. So how do we look back on Fears in the Illini here, Derek?
Interesting question. I do want to say that I wanted to have someone send Jeff Alexander a drink when Jeremiah Fears and Yegor Denman went back to back. Two
I
guys
think
that he
you
recruited.
guys the Matthew McConaughey smoking meme
Yeah. Yes.
from True Detective. That's probably how Jeff felt when Jeremiah went number 7.
No doubt. I mean, and he had Jeremiah locked up, obviously committed, and the reclass conversation went on for a while, and it was something that Illinois was really dug in on not taking his commitment as a guy that would come in early at 18 years old. And I get why.
History of that. It's like Boswell, who was the Indiana guard.
Christian Lander.
That's a bad history of small guards coming in at age 17, 18. Like so kudos to him, man. Like what he became.
Yeah. Him and his camp were right on some things that Illinois was wrong about ultimately. The fact that he could be a reclass lottery pick. That's what his dad flat out told me that, before Illinois got, I think it was, when they were recruiting Kylan Boswell in the portal, they obviously didn't have Kasparas, and said, hey, we think Jeremiah's ready. And Illinois really didn't ultimately, because he was a small guard who hadn't shot the ball consistently. And is really,
Still.
and I was, yeah, ever really. I mean, like you look at, I know early in his high school career, he was known as a flashy kind of like little Steph Curry-ish in terms of the deep range and everything. But when you look at him at Arizona Compass Prep and AAU with the UIBL, like I was listening to the Ringer pod on my drive home yesterday from the airport, and Bill Simmons had one of his guys at the Ringer who does the big board said he had Jeremiah at 20, because if you compile all of his shooting stats over different levels of competition, he's a sub 30% 3-point shooter, and that's who he's been for a long time. So ultimately, yeah, it's a little bit of a sour taste because it is an in-state guy, and it is a guy that played really well. And I don't know that it ever would have worked if you had. I mean, he would have just been another young piece that was inexperienced. If you throw him into the backcourt, maybe then you have I don't know if it's identity crisis, but you just got guys trying to eat into each other's opportunities and minutes and that type of thing. But it was amazing that Illinois even got him committed. It's unfortunate the way it played out. I said it earlier, he played better than Kasparas the final month and a half of the season, but obviously KJ was a much better player in the first 2 months. So unfortunate. And if he would have stayed in his class and you just said, hey, we had Kasparas and now he's out and went to the first round and here's Jeremiah, that would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, it's not like this decision they made to get Kasparas and tell Jeremiah, like, hey, we don't have a spot for you. Like this, you're not going to be happy here if you come here, and you're going to transfer out after a year. You're not going to be the NBA draft pick because we have other high usage guards here. And KJ was the better NBA prospect at the time. Bigger body, 6'6", 200. It's more translatable to what they're doing. I just give a lot of credit to Jeremiah Fears for becoming the player he did, the belief he and his family obviously had in him, and going to a spot in Oklahoma rather than maybe a spot he would have been buried. Like he got the ball at Oklahoma, was allowed to make the mistakes just like Kasparas was. At the end of the day, Illinois still had a top 20 pick at the position. So it's not like they made an incredible gaffe here. They made the NCAA tournament in all of that. So yeah, it's just it's an interesting thought as we go back. And yeah, you do feel for Jeff Alexander because he won a hell of a recruitment for that one, Derek.
He really did. Yeah, lottery pick. And to bounce back from telling Jeremy Fears Sr., or, well, you told him, but Jeremy Fears Jr., thanks but no thanks, we're actually good on a McDonald's All-American point guard that goes to Michigan State, and then you're able to still get his brother committed and it was going to come to Illinois. Like, that's crazy. And I don't know. It's one of those that recruitment of that family will be remembered for a long time.
Yeah, and I sit there. I mean, Jeremy's a really good point guard at Michigan State now. You wonder, like, if they would have just gone all in on the Fears. Like, is it better for Illinois? I don't know. I don't know if that's a clear yes. You still would have been good. Like, if you would have went with all in on the Fears family, you would have been good. But I don't know if it's incredibly better, at the end results of what your program is. But obviously, two kids from Joliet that could have made a big impact on the in-state program. But Illinois has done well regardless. Any final thoughts on that?
No, I think you nailed it. I think you're good.
All right. Any other draft thoughts? I mean, Dylan Harper to the Spurs. Spurs get lucky again in the lottery. Ace Bailey to the Jazz. We'll see if he shows up to Utah. I love Danny Ainge just going, Ace, you're talented. We have to take a high upside swing. You better show up because we're going to dig our heels in here. I don't get his representation trying to steer him into a place. It almost worked, I guess, because Charlotte passed on him, though I didn't think he made sense on a team with Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. That would have been atrocious. But complete high upside swing with Ace Bailey. Like, I love Dylan Harper. He's going to be a very good NBA player. Could be an all-star alongside Victor Wembanyama. I thought they made the right decision taking that pick rather than trading it for a veteran. But Ace Bailey, man, he's an experience.
in terms of perception, it's not great for him here recently. Just what's coming out about, what they were telling teams not to take him, and he was refusing to do workouts and interviews. But yeah, I mean, for the talent that Utah could add there, and even if he dug his heels in and said, "Hey, I'm actually not going to play for you," like I know that might tank his draft value a little bit, but he's an asset. Even if it doesn't work out, maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, he's an asset that you can move, and he's very talented. Ultimately, he should just go in there and bite the bullet and say, "I'm in the NBA, and let's see what we can do here." I love the talent they were able to get with him and Walter Clayton Jr. Didn't they get Tanjay last night as well? I mean, I know it's that Tanjay is a late second round pick who's already like 24 years old, but in terms of the first round that they had, really really good. The circus of Ace Bailey though is kind of wild.
Well,
And
the game of Ace Bailey is wild because there's times I go, man, that's like Baby Durant, and then there's other times I'm like, oh, that might be Rudy Gay or something like that. It's just like some of the shots he takes are like, oh my God, he made that, and it's like, why the hell did he take that at the same time? So the move of the draft, not for a good reason, probably, is the Pelicans giving up a haul for Derek Queen. I've seen a lot of Derek Queen, so I was like, oh, that'd be interesting on the Bulls is they say goodbye to Vucevic here in some time. So the fact that he went right after the Bulls, I was like, of course, he's going to make us pay for that because Derek Queen is such a talented offensive player, and I do think he's just got some crap to him that I could see him being a very good NBA player. Also think there's some risk in Derek Queen just with his he's not in the best shape, and there's not much defense there, effort, and maybe if a coach can get him to ramp that up. But the Pelicans giving up an unprotected draft pick for him. I mean, to add Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears to Zion Williamson and everything going on in New Orleans is going to be something. There's talent there, but to give up an unprotected first for a team that I think is going to be one of the worst 8 teams in the league, boy, good luck, Joe Dumars. But I like Derek Queen.
I like Derek Queen as well. I was bummed that the Bulls didn't take him. I know we'll talk about that here coming up. But certainly New Orleans, they don't have anybody that has had trouble staying in shape over there, have they? No, okay, actually, they do. They also have Jordan Poole, who's going to mix with Jeremiah Fears, that's going to be interesting.
This is the most what's the word I'm looking for? Combustible NBA team.
It is.
Like Trey Murphy, good luck to you, sir. Like you're a good NBA player. Missy's a good rim protector for them, but there's just kind of chaos all around those guys.
Yeah, and what are you doing trading? Look, Queen could be awesome, and I like obviously, like you said, offensive potential. But if you're not going to be a playoff team, you just gave someone a lottery pick, and we just saw the Mavs be able to, with the odds, how they landed. I mean, there's such an ability for this to be an old takes exposed trade, easy, and people are already identifying it right now. Obviously, that unless the Pelicans are a lot better than people expect, that draft pick is going to be pretty darn valuable in what's said to be a better draft next year. So that's a bold move, and bold's probably being kind. It looks like a pretty stupid move in terms of giving the unprotected pick. I like the player. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah. I think the player is good. If it was a protected first, I'd feel a lot better about it. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, go do that. But the chance that you're giving up a top 10, potentially top 5 pick in next year's draft is just absolutely crazy. Jace Richardson slips to the Magic. What a great fit. They need some playmakers. Love that. Danny Wolf to Brooklyn at 27. I think that's really interesting if they didn't have Igor Demin. Like just 2 7-footers basically who are point forwards, point guards probably. Like that's crazy. But I thought one of the coolest things of this draft from a Big Ten perspective is Penn State had a draft pick for the first time, a first-round draft pick for the first time ever, is Conan Niederhausen, went number 30 to the LA Clippers. I watched the first 5 minutes. I think I looked at you and said, this guy's really interesting against Illinois. And then I watched the rest of the game and like, what is he doing? Like there's just so much size and athleticism and physicality there, but I just think he's got a lot of development to do as a basketball player, but high upside swing. Kudos to Northern Illinois for finding him, and then Penn State gets him there. But Brooks Barnheiser, the first draft pick for Northwestern in 25 years. Evan Eschmeyer, 1999 was the last one, 26 years, goes number 44 to OKC. I love watching Brooks Barnheiser. I hated that he got, that last game he ever played in college was against Illinois. Just so easy to root for him. Just a tough, physical player, skilled. So I'm really glad he's going to have a chance at the NBA. It's such a great franchise. But kudos to Penn State, Northwestern, getting some draft picks here, Derek.
No doubt about it. Yeah. With Yannick, it's unfortunate for Penn State. I thought for a while he was going to go back to State College. Although if he would have on the front end said, I'm going to play another year of college basketball, there's probably a good chance he would have been in the portal and commanding big money. I think Ozzie Trotter had let us know that there's some big numbers thrown out about what he could have earned if he decided to go into the open market. I mean, you think about, bigs always seem to get paid in terms of, if they're, and he's a great shot blocker and has some upside for sure. He was just chucking threes in that Illinois game. I know they were getting blown out or ultimately got just eviscerated, but yeah, he was just chucking threes. Like, all right, this is good. This is a win for Illinois' defense. But certainly cool for Penn State to have that. Northwestern. Yeah, like you said, Barnhizer, one of my favorite players to watch in the Big Ten in recent years. Just how hard he plays. He's very skilled and mid post game. He can just do everything. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife type of player, and you just appreciate his mentality and his grit, his edge, and the way that he approaches it. So,
what a win for Chris Collins, who, it's amazing when a Northwestern coach can have a lot of respect from the Illini fan base. How can you not with Chris Collins and what he's done there, the evaluations they've done. Nick Martinelli, I hope gets a chance too. He's such a joy to watch, such a tough player, skilled player. So kudos to them because they got to find those guys. Like we asked Chris Collins in April when he was down at Gordyville, how do you deal with, this era of college basketball? So we have to recruit high school kids. And it's kind of a zig and zag. You might have more high school kids that you can actually get because everyone else is going to focus on the transfer portal. But I hope that's good for him on the recruiting trail because that's a heck of a development, and Martinelli is too.
It definitely should be, no doubt. And yeah, it's a big. And we've been giving Chris a lot of flowers here in the last year or two, and he deserves it. The idea that we're sitting here saying, I think not only us but Illinois fans, if you in a hypothetical world that Brad Underwood said, I'm good on college basketball, I'm going to retire, we could have a real conversation. Is Chris Collins one of the first calls that Josh Whitman should make? If Chris was the guy, what would be the approval rating? I think it would be pretty high.
I do too.
I think you'd probably say it's at least a BB plus higher for Illinois, and that says a lot about not long ago the idea of Illinois stealing Northwestern's coach would be met with just, are you kidding me? That sounds terrible.
Yeah, because
Mike Thomas.
You wonder what he could do with resources, right? That's why the Villanova thing really intrigued me. If he went to Villanova, could have had resources to do that. So kudos to Northwestern for being able to keep him. I mean, he's one of the longest tenured coaches in this league. So been fun to watch that develop. I don't have huge thoughts on the Bulls taking Noah Essengay because I don't know much about him.
I don't either.
I like the idea of him. 6'9", athletic, and can really defend. Good in transition. I think that fits along Modest and all the guards that can score for them. Could be a fun style of play, but he's 18 until December. And he ain't going to make immediate impact here, which I'm kind of happy the Bulls are looking long-term and taking a high upside guy because I loved Bazell. Getting him at 11 last year, I was like, this is insane in a bad draft. So I love taking a high upside guy. I did like Derek Queen there because I've seen him and I know what he is. And I thought he would have fit this offense of what the Bulls are doing. So I tweeted out, I'm really looking forward to the Bulls having one of Kamen Malawach, Kasparas, and Derek Queen there and taking a developmental European big man. He's more of a wing forward, and that's what they did. I hope he works out. I just have no idea. It's just hard to get excited about the Bulls, but at least maybe they're thinking long-term here. But, man, if we had that Pelicans offer, if the Pelicans offered the Bulls the same deal they gave the Hawks, that's where I'd be pissed. That, because it's we could have gotten Asa Newell late, right? Or a Danny Wolf or something like that, and then gotten that top 10 pick next year. Those are the moves the Bulls need to be doing.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, there have been such rare occasions where the Bulls recently have been within the top 10, had a draft where they've been in the lottery with decent odds and have recently they've just been playing, hey, let's get to the play-in and we'll figure it out from there. But the idea that could have been such a huge steal, the Pelicans give away that unprotected, and then that maybe turns into a top 5, top 8 draft pick next year. you're right. That's what they need to be able to do. Not trading for cash considerations in the second round.
Yeah,
Why
can
do you
we
need?
at least get some like future second rounders? She has some
Yeah.
capital. Like we need capital. Like what is Jerry Reinsdorf just loves cash, man. Like he loves
Yes.
cash more than giving his NBA team some resources to actually put into trades and make their team better.
Yeah, I know. I know. Simmons said it's the big market team that's never paid a luxury tax. So yeah, I don't know. Bulls fans, which Bulls fans got to be super happy about. I will say I don't know anything about Essengay, but I was in his press conference. One thing that was really interesting, like you said, we've never covered a draft before, so it was new to me that there were quite a few French reporters there, and so you go into the press conference, and it's just if they ask a question in French, it's responded to in French. There's no translator. I had no idea what he was saying for most of his interview. And man, Jansen, the dude that goes, where did he go? The Brooklyn Nets?
He went to Portland.
Portland. The amount of coverage from China was unbelievable. That press room was stuffed full of reporters from China. It had just a huge following with them. And again, like it didn't bother me. It was just kind of amazing that that whole interview process was not for me. It was not for people in America. It was all in Chinese mostly.
Was there anybody from Lithuania or Europe or Canada for
I was
KJ?
expecting there to be. I don't think so.
Okay. There seemed to always be a Canada person around Will throughout this process.
I think there was a guy from Canada because he asked him about Kitchener up there where he's from in Ontario. But and yeah, we had reporters come from Lithuania at an Illinois game. It was actually the USC game where he was out. It felt really bad. Those guys made the trip to come over and do like a behind the scenes one-on-one with him up close and personal, and he was out for that game. But yeah, it was pretty amazing to see. And look, France is churning them out right now. And actually, Essengay got asked about, hey, you look forward to face some of the Americans that knocked out France in the title game, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, I want to be part of the movement to show America that we're ready for 2028. And I was like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, they're really working to win one. Like I kudos to Steph and KD and all of them for beating that team in France. Like that seemed like destined last year. Last question I got for you, Derek. Who's the next Illini draft pick? They got a couple prospects. I just saw ESPN's top 60 came out. Both Ivisic brothers are on the list, as is Andrei Stojakovic, though they are second round draft picks according to these guys. So I'll get the actual ranking here soon. But who do you think is the best prospect among those three?
It's a good question. I think that Stojakovic and Tommy both go in next year's draft, and could be Z as well if Z figures some things out and is more consistent. The best NBA prospect, man. Teams really like Tommy from what I've heard. We had Jeremy Wu on the radio a couple weeks ago and talked about that, and we've heard that as well. Look, Andre has a lot of skills, and if he shoots the ball a little more consistently up to his high school profile, like he could be someone similar to Will as a big talented playmaking wing that can be put in a lot of different situations and do a lot of different things. I almost want to say Tommy because there aren't very many 7'1" guys that shoot like that pass it like that. And I've heard he's been great in workouts so far. They say he's a different guy. He's just his approach to everything is so much different because he's just taking a lot of ownership. He's really comfortable. He's a leader. His work ethic has gone up a lot, and he's just taking it he's just been very businesslike, very professional, and looks like someone that is planning for this to be his last year at Illinois based on how good he's playing and how good he's looking.
Yeah, I think the model for him, and I know Bulls fans might have a negative connotation, but it's Vucevic. Like he's not quite as strong yet, and that's going to be such a huge part. But Vucevic, I think, was a 4-year player here. So Tommy's would be the same age going to the NBA as him. Vucevic was the 16th overall pick. I don't know if he's going to be that in this upcoming draft for Tommy, but I do think there's a pretty high floor. I would be surprised if he's not drafted because Derek, you're talking about 5 out. He can do that. But he also at least gives you something defensively and on the glass. That's my question with Z, right? Like he can shoot, he can block shots. It's everything in between. Can he do the other things between that? But the ceiling certainly is high for Z. And I do think he's got to get a chance to get drafted next year because the ceiling is really interesting since he's a little bit more athletic, quick than Tommy is. Stojakovic is the one that really intrigues me. Because he's got the pedigree. He's a former McDonald's All-American. This is not a guy without athleticism, without like big wing who can score at all three levels. This year is so important for all of that, though, right? To be efficient, to do it at a higher level. So I think Stojakovic might have the highest ceiling of a guy that I think could go late first round if everything goes right for him, right? I don't know if it's going to be top 20 or anything like that, but that kind of wing who can do a little bit of everything. There's definitely an appetite for that in the NBA, but I would go with Tommy or Andre. It's just Tommy's probably got the higher floor now, but Andre might have a little higher ceiling just because 1 year younger as well, but just because the versatility he has. And if he really can defend, like Brad Underwood's talking about, he can defend, then, 3-and-D guy and a guy who can create a little bit off the bounce, that's in high demand in the NBA.
No, I agree with that framing for sure. And yeah, Andre's ability to block some shots, had that length. He's got good length to him. He's very much a good athlete in terms of just he's fluid. He's fluid. He has some bounce to him. He's probably a little bit underrated. I know we'll get to see him coming up a lot more, closely and get to really paint that picture. A lot of people weren't watching Cal basketball last year, which I don't blame you. And it's hard to fully get a gauge on some highlight tapes and those type of things. But the shooting is something that is, his open catch and shoot number has been pretty poor. He's been a sub 30% open catch and shoot guy. Now, one counter could be, ball in his hands was a ton at Cal. Guys didn't take pressure off of him. He just maybe didn't get a ton of opportunities. But now with like Petrovic getting here, no, I haven't heard anything new for anybody wondering about Mihailo and also Mihailo, I should say, and David Mirkovic. But yeah, I mean, guys are going to be able to set him up this year. Tommy, as a playmaker, can he knock down those shots efficiently like the NBA is going to want to see? He's done a lot else that is going to play well. Someone that can get to the rim, someone that can play in some ISOs, some matchup hunting, use his size against smaller defenders, be a decent, lengthy. He's not going to be a plus defender in the NBA, but he's a guy that can maybe guard multiple positions and be someone again with that length that's going to play. So. I like his potential. If he has the year that he should definitely be an NBA draft pick. Maybe Tommy ends up being, I don't know. Could Tommy could be the higher draft pick if he clicks. I could see him being like a late first guy, in my opinion. But I was in particular, like, to circle back, pretty excited about what I was hearing about Tommy here recently, and I think he could have a huge season.
Yeah, just to fill people in, ESPN, Gavoni and Wu have Stojakovic, number 45, in their early draft rankings here for 2026. Tommy at number 48, Z at number 60. I never know how to use this term, but can I gaslight Illinois fans here? Or just get a rise out of them. Number 9, Dame Sar.
Oh,
I get it. I get it. I really like his NBA potential. This stings probably even more though. Number 33, Morez Johnson Jr.
Dang.
I get it. He's really good. And he's gonna have a
really good season. I think with Morez it's gonna be really interesting. The identity part of it. Like, is all the noise of his exit at Illinois, is he going to try to be someone that he's not and try to show a bunch of offensive skill that that isn't part of who he is? That sometimes can mess up some people's trajectories. Morez is a really good player, and I think he's somebody that, I think he should know and probably does what has gotten him to this point: his physicality, effort, rebounding, rim running, like all those type of things. And it sounds like he played great at the USA camp here recently. But yeah, I think that's something that's going to be interesting for Illinois fans to see. Is he trying to shoot threes or face up or do a bunch of moves that isn't really in his makeup of what he's shown?
Yeah, if I'm him, and I know he's not as tall as this guy, but I'm just watching a bunch of Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, just watch that guy, what he does: set screens, rim run, play defense, get a bunch of shots around. You can get some shots around the rim, especially a lot of these putbacks. Just be elite at that. Like, there's always a need for that in the NBA. And I know he's not 7 foot. He's probably closer to 6'9", 6'10", but that there's a path to that in the league. And I think, if he even just sticks to that, then his offensive game will grow a little bit as he gets more comfortable. We saw some one dribble things. I've always thought, like, if he stayed in college for 3 or 4 years, I think he's got All-American potential. I think he's that good. So it's not a surprise for me to see him going to his sophomore year on some of these NBA draft lists. Will he be that after this year? I don't know. But I get it because I know he's got a couple elite traits, and that's effort, that's strength, and that is rebounding. And he cares on defense. So some NBA team's going to want that in their team at some point. So it was a loss. Like, losing Perez was a loss.
It was for sure. One thing I would say, though, if I were to compare the NBA rankings to who I'd want on my team, I would prefer, if I had to choose between Tommy and Merez, I'd rather have Tommy. And
I would choose Tommy next year for my college team too, which is obviously what this is about, right?
Yes, exactly.
Tommy is a better player, and he's a more impactful player because of his ability to stretch the floor. Like, that is just so huge for what Illinois does.
Yeah, I think there was just some jealousy, some underlying jealousy between Merez, not the players themselves, but I think Merez's camp saw how Tommy was featured, how he was utilized, and that he was prioritized as the guy at the 5 who was doing all this stuff. So I think Illinois made the right decision in terms of that. Yes, you wanted to have both, and both did play together last year and work. And I would rather have Merez over Z, obviously, but in a similar conversation, Dame Sarr versus Andre, it's a big range in terms of where Dame's at on the draft board. I'd rather have on my college team Andre Stojakovic next year, even though I think Sarr is going to have a really nice season. And it would have been great if you could find a way to get both those guys. But I understand why it didn't play out that way, and money, and
that's a budget thing. That's a usage
other
thing.
needs, and you spent a lot of money. You spent a lot of money in building this roster, so it's not like they didn't, they weren't in the range that we expected them to be in. And I think, but the idea that, we were preparing, full disclosure, I remember hitting you up after covering the game at Michigan State and being like, I think Dame Sarr, based on what I've heard, is about to commit in the next week. Yeah. And you made a graphic. I was scrolling through my phone. I was on a flight, and I was like, hey, I'm going to look at some pictures of my kids, scrolling through my photos on my phone. I ran into the Dame Sarr graphic you sent me. I'm like, oh, man, remember?
So many graphics, so many stories that are just commit stories that are just kind of in the ether somewhere, saved, not published.
Got to be prepared. But,
No, Dame is going to be a higher draft pick than Andre, just because, it's going to be like, Will and KJ. I mean, the flashes are going to be awesome next year. I love his potential. He reminds me of Andrew Wiggins, which was a former number 1 overall pick. This draft, he's not going to be quite that. Andrew was, I think, better offensively at that point, but just the length, the athleticism, size. He's got everything you want in an NBA wing. Just has to continue to get those skills developed and sharpened, but huge ceiling. But Andre Stojakovic, I know what I'm signing up for every night. I know what I'm getting every night. And obviously Brad saw last year, like, the freshmen are great. The talent is through the roof, but I got to have something I can rely on, and putting Andre with Tommy and Kyle Boswell. That's one of the best big threes, if you want to call it that, in college basketball.
Yeah, I think Brad's not going to be most likely in the green room next year, but he might be in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. So I think and that's what you're playing for. And you can still be at a draft party, with Andre, Tommy, but those guys should, they've compiled a roster that, like you said, veterans, it fits together. Just got to, man, you got to get Petrovic here, and obviously Mirkovic as well. And we got time to, we'll do a podcast later if Mahalo's not here and things aren't sorted out. That there'll be a time where you do start to worry. It's still early enough that you don't. Yeah. But if they get their full roster here, Ty Rodgers is a big loss. But they should have a chance to make a nice run, have a really nice season. That's ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah, we just talked about 3 guys. This potential NBA draft picks next year. Just keep that thing rolling, because you got to have that talent to be able to win at the highest level of college basketball. Derek, great stuff, man. From Brooklyn. I know it was probably a cool experience, a whirlwind, because it was a quick trip in and out, but great coverage from there. Check it out at Illini Inquirer if you haven't yet. If you're not a VIP member, 50% off for your first year of coverage. That's more than $60 off. Any last draft thoughts or nuggets that you saw when you were there?
I did see Hurley there. We didn't have any. I was thought about going up and being like, I don't know what the right way to say it is, but I kind of wanted to kind of poke it a little bit. Hey, Illinois and UConn at the Garden, and you got any thoughts on? We hear a lot from your fans about the 30-0 runs. That's something that you think about a lot. But no,
Whitman
I
told us
mean,
yesterday the UConn likely to come back to or not Champaign, but
oh yeah,
Chicago for the United Center game in 2027. So pumped about that, man.
yep,
That's
that
the
would be
kind of
really
game
really
we
cool.
need, not the last couple games we covered up there.
Yeah, you think about it, you're going to get Bama up there, you're going to get Tennessee up there, and then if you get UConn up there, like that's a heck of a run. And the Chicago United Center game is back in a big way if that happens. This means nothing to anybody, but it's kind of an interesting story. On my flight out, I went through the TSA line at the same time as Benedict Matherin. Benedict
Nice.
Matherin does not have pre-check, so this guy is one of the people. But he got told by multiple, "Hey, you're balling out there, man," which he did. But it's just me and Benedict going through there.
Now I'm looking up how much Benedict Matherin makes. Like, I get not flying private. I mean, he's very rich, but that's still like $30,000 is not anything to just kind of throw away. But
Sure,
he could have flown private,
I think you could have got that done. Yeah,
or at least had somebody sign up for pre-check for him so he could just get through the line.
I appreciate him being one of us.
That's right. Yeah, one of us. Appreciate that. Well, Derek, great coverage, man. Appreciate it as always. For everyone listening to you, we appreciate it. Follow us, rate us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button right now. Appreciate you doing that. Subscribe to us, hit the notifications bell as well. For Derek Piper, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.